Saphiophile. Noun. One who is attracted to intelligence. Join us, fellow fun-loving lover of knowledge, as we dig into your favorite topics with our very own nerdy diatribes, words of wisdom, and takes on life as millennials. Welcome to the Saphiophile.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome back, listeners. And Kayla is here, and I am here. Kayla's decked out in her Red Sox gear because she just went to the Red Sox game where they did amazingly. And even though I am from Yankees territory, I'm very proud of them.
Thank you. Yes, I'm so psyched. I went to Fenway. I got to see the Red Sox play the Mets. It was actually a really close game. We ended up beating the Mets 4-3, and it was just a really good, played game of baseball, in my opinion. Lots of cool things happening. We got to see a pickle. We got to see some sacrifice flies, some, amazing pitching, especially from the Mets pitcher, who's one of the best in the league right now. But yeah, some great stuff. Good baseball played today, and now I'm ready to talk.
Now, would you say baseball uses more of your right brain or your left brain?
Ooh.
It's a tricky one.
What would you say?
Well,
it is a tricky one. Baseball to me is very strategic, and I understand that can be said about a lot of sports, but baseball specifically, the things players doing sacrifice bunts or sacrifice flies, just all the math involved with putting together the right batting order or the right pitching order, or even when the pitcher and catcher are talking about what pitch to throw to a certain batter because of that batter's averages. It's very mathematical, and there's a lot of strategy going on there. So
I agree. I would say it's more of a left brain activity.
Yeah, I'd say
although it
sure.
involves both sides of the brain, which today is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about your right and your left brain, how they work together, different careers that use them, what happens when they don't talk to each other. So a lot of cool things about your brain. So fun facts. Here's my list of fun facts. The brain has 100 billion neurons. That's a lot of neurons. It has 100 billion neurons. It makes up only 2% of the body's weight, but it uses up to 25% of the body's energy.
Wow.
So your brain is powerful. It is like a super high-powered computer. It knows what to do. It gets all kinds of things done. It says, here's my task, and I'm going to do it. So, according to studies, we actually do use both hemispheres equally, but not always in the same way. So, the concept of being right-brained or left-brained in the same way that you're right-handed or left-handed is not scientifically backed, but because of the functions that each side of your brain performs, we, personality-wise, have parts of our brain that we gravitate towards and focus on in that way. So, our hemisphere functions, if you're not familiar with the right and left brain concept, it's a way to classify which part of your brain is working on the things that you are best at. So, your left hemisphere is the part that is responsible for your language and your speech production. It's the part that reads and writes. Although, interestingly, your right hemisphere can read. It just can't tell you what it read, which I'll get to in a second. They both can read, but only your left hemisphere can speak and explain itself. The left side of your body controls your right limbs. Left side controls your right limbs, and your right side controls your left limbs.
Anyways, it's just the opposite brain controls the opposite hand. And arm. And leg.
Yes. The side of your body. Okay. So your left hemisphere also processes sign language, even though it's a physical activity. And it's visual. Because it's language, it's actually still processing your language center. Pretty cool. Your left brain is responsible for your internal thoughts and sensations, your logical thinking, your mathematical thinking, your linear thinking, sequential order, pattern recognition, organization, and detail recognition. So that's your left brain. It does all of those things.
It's a great brain.
It's a great brain, right? But It can't do everything. It can't process emotion. It can't recognize faces, knowing if somebody is like your friend or your foe. It can't be creative. It can't visualize. So when you're reading a book, your left brain is reading the words, but your right brain is making those pictures. So your right brain is responsible for your emotions, processing of other people's emotions. So all of your empathetic nature, that's all right brain. It's responsible for the left side of your body. It's responsible for perceiving the external world. So your left brain processes what's happening in your body. Your right brain processes what you visually see. Your left brain can see as well. They both can see, but your right brain interprets what you see. So it's all your visualization, creativity, imagination. It is artistic. It processes images. It's where any kind of artistic talent comes from. It sees things in big picture, more so than finite details. It is the part of your brain that processes things like philosophy, psychology, religion, any abstract thinking. And it is the part of your brain that has the adrenaline rush and the risk-taking. That's right brain. So the decision to take risks is your right brain. Cool things.
Probably because it's also the emotional part of the brain. And often risk-taking has to do with our emotions and how we're interpreting them.
It does. So other interesting facts about the brain. Your brain can reroute these functions if something happens. So if you have an injury, your brain could learn to read on your right side, or vice versa. It can switch up things. Not everybody has all of their functions in the same places, but those are generally where the functions lie.
Okay. And of course, I mean, I'm sure some of our listeners have heard this, and I believe that you and I have talked about this before, but taking tests in school about whether you favor your left or right brain. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I need to retake this test because I don't know. I feel like there are a lot of characteristics of both that I do not know if I have any. Yeah.
I took it today and I was maybe like 2% more right-brained, but it was like so.
Oh my God.
It was almost perfectly exact. So I'm a split. I'm an even split. I'm very empathetic. I'm very creative. I'm very imaginative. And I think that's why I got like a smidge more on the right side. But I'm also a language person. I'm very into words, into language. I'm not always the neatest, but I'm organized. Like I do have my organization. I recognize patterns. I was never as into math, but I was able to do it well. I was good at math. Music, actually, you would think is only creative, but it's actually a lot of mathematical. So that's kind of both sides.
People that are musicians tend to score higher on their math SATs than people that aren't musicians.
So I was right in the middle. So it depends. I mean, I consider myself both. I'm, in education, which is a lot of organization, a lot of paperwork, a lot of logistical stuff. That's left brain. And also I teach language. But a lot of what I have to do is super creative in terms of planning, in terms of being empathetic, in terms of all my other projects. I do a lot of art, music, theater, literature, like a lot of things that are on the creative side. So I'm kind of split.
I feel like I'd be fairly evenly split as well. With what I do in international education, you have to be, of course, very organized. You have to be a connoisseur of language and many different languages, at least have an interest and a desire to learn more about different languages and cultures. But you also need to have that big picture visualization. So when you were saying the characteristics of both, I was very, very torn. I feel like I am very, very middle ground because I am creative, but even in my emotional life, I use a lot of, I don't know, I don't want to say mathematical things, but just very strategic decisions and logical decisions that I rely much more heavily on logic and strategy than I do emotions, even though I am in tune with people's emotions, but it's not always what I depend on myself when I initially make decisions.
Okay.
I think that you probably agree with that. That I always try to think of a logical way to understand something before I say, okay, what am I doing emotionally? So, I don't know. It's interesting.
Cool. So, your brain is super powerful. It can reroute your functions, and it does all of these awesome things. So, thinking about if you're more left-brained or right-brained, that's interesting too. Also, I was researching some stuff about split brain patients, which is super interesting because that's when you can really separate what each hemisphere does and you can actually see it. So split brain experiments were done with patients who have a severed corpus callosum. And your corpus callosum is the part of your brain that ties the hemispheres together, that communicates between the right and the left. So all of your functions can be completely intact without that piece. You will be able to do everything. But when they can't talk to each other, there's a couple weird things that go on. And splitting the brain in half used to be a treatment for epilepsy in the past.
Physically splitting the brain in half?
Yeah.
That's insane.
In the 50s, that is what they did.
Wow. That puts American Horror Story Asylum in a whole new perspective for me, but continue.
Yeah, so they would do that where they would split between the two hemispheres, and all the functions would be intact of both sides of your brain, but they wouldn't be able to communicate with each other. So this led to some really interesting research and experiments.
All right, so experiments took place or came to fruition because they were using this treatment for epilepsy, splitting the brain, so the brain, goodness gracious, I don't have a brain tonight, so that the brain was intact but could not communicate within itself.
Yes. So your right brain and your left brain can completely function without talking to each other. And you, as a human, are able to still do everything, but it makes for some weird side effects. So, because your left hemisphere is the hemisphere that speaks, it makes it so that there's really like two people within your head. And there's one that can speak, and then there's this other like creature that's living there that the person who can speak doesn't know what's going on with, and sometimes it disagrees. So there have been situations where like the speaking person will use their right hand to pick something up, and the other person will say, no, we don't want that, and take their left hand and knock it out of their hand. So there's weird stuff that goes on like that. And in some of these experiments that they did, they would split a visual field. So you were only looking at things with your right eye or your left eye. And the things that you're looking at with your right eye, you were able to speak about because your left brain is seeing them.
Right.
But the things that you were looking at with your left eye, you were not able to speak about. However, it doesn't mean you didn't process them, because if they were to do other experiments with asking you to draw something with your left hand or pick up a random thing with your left hand, you were actually processing that information. It's just the speaking person has no knowledge of it.
Oh,
so it was very cool and very interesting. So they would split a screen, and they would put two things on the screen. And the one in your right field of vision that is going to your left hemisphere, you'd be able to explain. The one in your left field of vision, you would be able to do with your left hand, but you wouldn't know what you were doing. Right. And then your your left brain tried to rationalize what was going on. So let's say there was something in your left field of vision for your right brain that said, pick up a Rubik's Cube. Mm-hmm. Your right brain sees this and picks up a Rubik's Cube, but your left brain has no knowledge that you read anything. So your left brain, the person who can consciously speak, sees that you picked up a Rubik's Cube. If you ask that person, why'd you take the Rubik's Cube? They make up a story. And they don't realize that they're lying. It's just, they don't have any conscious knowledge of why they did it. So they're like, I always wanted to learn how to do one of these. And And they don't believe that they're lying. It's just like if you were to think about it in the sense that if you were to kind of absentmindedly grab something and someone said, "Why'd you pick that up?" You'd be like, "Huh, maybe I was thinking about it," and you would kind of make something up. But the reason was there was something that you read that you didn't process that you read that told you to do that.
So were these tests done with the same 1950s patients who underwent that very incorrect form of therapy?
Yeah.
So they were then tested like this when the people realized that it wasn't actually working, but they wanted to figure out why. Interesting.
So there is also a small percentage of people who are just born with their hemispheres don't talk. And they are a little more efficient in figuring out back channels of communicating because they were born like that. But they do some of these weird things too. And I tried to test this as I was reading about it. And one of the ways that you can test your right brain versus your left brain function is if you cover your right eye and read. You can do it and you can speak, you can read out loud what you're reading, but are you thinking harder? I noticed I was reading slower and thinking harder.
Yeah, I skim read with my right eye.
Your right eye can read really quickly. Your left eye, you have to think a little harder and process because you're processing that as a picture, as an image, and not as letters. And that image is then getting transferred from the right side of your brain to the left side of your brain where you can then recognize it as a word. It's not your right brain or your right eye, which is the left side of your brain, will just recognize the words. So it takes a split second longer to read with just your left eye. So fun, cool stuff. Yeah.
That's interesting because when I was younger, I used to run into some hurdles when I was learning to read. And a lot of it, my teachers told me, was because I was looking at the words as images.
Yeah.
And it's because I had watched my family read to me and I started to pick up on, well, cat means that, or frightened means that. But I hadn't necessarily learned those words in school as this word is frightened because of this, 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 and this in the parts of the word. So that was one of the things that when I was younger kind of made it more difficult for me to read at a certain level. And then once I reached that certain level, I was fine. It was, so it's funny that you say that because it took me a little while longer, but not several seconds longer to figure it out.
That's not uncommon.
That's
not uncommon with kids who read more slowly. A lot of them do see it as images. And that's why you see things like letter reversals. Because you can flip an object upside down, right side up, to the side, and it's the same object, right? You can look at it from any angle and it's the same thing. But if you rotate a B, now it's not a B.
Right.
So because they see it as a picture, it causes problems in that sense as well.
Interesting. Because my reading, I think I've told you this before, Chelsea, that my reading was on par by the time I was in third grade. And then I jumped ahead. By the time I was in fourth grade, I was doing fifth and sixth grade vocabulary. Yeah. But that little in between, when you're starting to learn how to read in kindergarten, first, second grade, I had that issue where I was seeing all the things. And it's because and it was because my brain, the same thing that happened to me in figure skating, that my brain saw something, it knew that it could do it, so I tried it, which is why I had to learn all my figure skating jumps over again, because I saw someone do it, I mimicked it, and I think my brain did the same thing with reading. So you're a
very visual learner.
Like, I am a very visual learner, absolutely.
And I think being a very visual learner is something that your right brain takes control of. So that was, maybe you are more in the middle, and I do think you have a lot of left brain qualities as well, but maybe you're more in the middle as an adult, but you maybe started as a right brain kid.
So, question for, I guess, along the lines of what we were just speaking about with splitting of the brain. this question just popped into my head, so I don't know if you have the answers to this in your research or if you happen to research this, because I think you might have, just based on what I know about you. But so with the patients that they tried to do some treatment for epilepsy and they split it, they ended up having these two, not dueling personalities, but separate, and maybe it's not personalities, but at least separate entities within their brain. However, they weren't in constant conflict with one another, nor was one part not working. Right. So in a sociopath, is the right brain just not working, or a part of the right brain not working? Because they're still visually seeing things, but the emotional part's just not there.
I don't know for sure. I would venture to guess that the part of your right brain that processes emotion and empathy is not functioning. I would venture to guess that. Yeah. I'm not positive how it works, though, but that makes sense. Might be something to
look up. Or if any of our listeners happen to have their degrees in these higher forms of psychology and know that answer, we'd love to know it. We'll probably look it up anyway. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and one of the things that was super interesting about this is that the two sides of the brain can disagree on things when they did these experiments. So internal conflicts that we face, it's possible that the different parts of your brain know different things about it, and that is why you're having an internal conflict. So your right brain may actively disagree with your left brain on things. So another thing that they did as part of these experiments was they asked questions to both sides of the brain. And the way you did that is you just ask normally to the left brain because that's the one who talks. And then to the right brain, you put the question somewhere where the left brain can't see it. They read the question. And then they can point to things or draw things to answer it. And there were situations where they fundamentally disagreed on big things. Like there were situations where there was one side of the brain who was very religious and another side that was an atheist. It was so weird. So it's possible for you to have internal conflict within yourself because of the way that the different parts of your brain process things. It can just disagree.
And I think to that point that it's so important that both sides of our brain have those disagreements and that they can work it out. Like our brain is just so amazing. I was just thinking, I was hiking out Monadnock this weekend on Saturday morning. And when you started talking about the disagreement of the brain, I was shot immediately back to earlier this weekend when I was hiking down the mountain, and one side of the mountain had a staircase, like a staircase of rocks, which was very, very clearly the easier path. But my other side of my brain, the visual one, was seeing there's water on that staircase. You shouldn't take that one. You should take the one that's actually more difficult, even though logically that one looks easier. And I ended up going to the one that was more difficult, and the person next to me went down the staircase and slipped. Mm-hmm. So, like, it was, just like using, there was the logical side that was like, well, that staircase is easier, but the visual side saying, maybe so, but look at what's on that easy path.
Right.
Maybe it's not the right choice.
So like, situations like that.
When you were saying that, I'm like, oh my God.
We do disagree with our own brains all the time, but when they can communicate to each other, they work together and they come to some kind of consensus, or at least something like that. Like, sometimes we do find ourselves in those situations where we make a decision that, like, we hate that we have to make, and that's probably when one side really still disagrees, but it's just the one side is a little stronger. So that was interesting. Mm-hmm. I love researching about this stuff. It's cool. So we all function with both of these parts of our brains. And personality-wise, we're probably either a little more right or a little more left, or you're like us and you're pretty evenly split. One of the ways that you can tell, there's tests that you can take online. One of the most popular tests is the color word test. Have you ever seen the color word test?
No, but I'm taking it after this call. So color word test?
So it's just a test where words flash on a screen that are names of colors. And sometimes the color of the word matches the name. And sometimes the color of the word is a different color than the... So it could say yellow in purple.
Okay.
And your job is to select, it'll tell you either select the word or select the color. So you'll have like choices that you have to click really quickly through. And if you are a left-brained person, primarily, you are picking the word. If you're a right-brained person, primarily, you are picking the color of the word. Because it's two conflicting pieces of information, that test is your brain fighting with itself to see who's a little bit stronger. Because your right brain wants to say the color of the word, and your left brain wants to say the word that's written.
Okay. So, listeners, I will take this test, and I will tell you next podcast what I get.
I was like a smidge more right brain, but barely.
Okay. So, interesting. I'm just curious as to this. I'm very, very drawn to specific colors. I like, this. I like bold colors. I like pink, like hot pink. I like red, cerulean blue, emerald green.
Those are
even
great
like
colors.
Very vibrant. Yeah, but I'm not as drawn to like a light pink or a light purple or a baby blue. So if the lettering, I'm wondering if the lettering was saying, like, say the word was purple and I saw red, like a beautiful red color, I'd be like, red. Like, that's what I would think. But if the word said yellow and it was like light purple, I might read it as yellow just because my brain doesn't like that color as much as it likes that word.
I think that's a thing. I mean, I'm not an expert on it, but I think that's a thing. I mean, I was able to say both the color or the word, whatever it told you to do, at different times with different levels of success, I guess. But there were certain words that I felt like were easier or harder. So if I was supposed to say the name of the word, yeah, I think a less obnoxious color would be easier.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
I was just wondering.
I don't know. I'm not an expert on it, but I think that's really cool.
I don't want to, like, give our listeners a, like, more infantile way of thinking about my brain, but I feel like I would just be like, ooh, pretty. Like, it was like a really pretty red.
I think we all went a little bit.
But, like, I feel like I'd be like, oh, look at that. Like, that's green. Like, like.
Well, yeah, there's certain things that if you really like looking at, you just kind of say when you see. Like,
Yeah.
I've noticed if I'm walking down the street and somebody is walking a puppy towards me, I'm like, puppy! And I don't even try to say puppy, but I say puppy because I like puppies and I see one.
I feel like neither my left side nor my right side of my brain has any control of my eye roll.
No, they don't.
Like, I feel like that just is like my, like...
You have the sassy girl eye roll down.
Yeah.
I don't know. Eye roll I think would be right brain because it's from an emotion. Yeah,
it's emotional response to usually a visual stimulation.
So I think your right brain is rolling its eyes.
Yeah, so my right brain is obviously like at work quite a bit during my general everyday life.
Yeah.
Or I'll notice that under my breath, I'll go, oh my god. Like, a lot.
But you're also a linguistic, scientific, inquisitive mind, so you're also left-brained.
I am.
Cool. So, another thing I was not talking about, I was researching, was careers that are very particular, one type or the other. And then, maybe careers that would be good for somebody who's kind of in the middle, like us.
All right.
So, let's see. You can jump in if you think of more, too. So, let's do left-brained careers.
Okay. All right. Left-brain careers. So, linguist, mathematician.
But, like, what type of just a linguist? Like, someone who studies language?
No, like, someone who, like, specifically, like, you're as grammarian as you can possibly get. Someone that is literally interested in the study of words for words' sake.
Okay. Yeah, so, like, that podcast, The Illusionist, which is good, by the way. People should listen to it.
I feel like a lot of people in the research field, specifically in the sciences, if you're in the lab, or although that's very visual too.
I wrote down. I researched a lot of this, and I wrote down what it was saying for the left brain and right brain careers. And then when I looked at it, I was like, but you need a little bit of the other side. So here's what came up. as I was looking like, what's a great career for a left brainer and what's a great career for a right brainer? Because this is what I do. I type these things into my computer, and this is what I do. So, all right, left brain careers. Scientist.
Okay. Yeah.
It is left brain. It's very, you have to follow specific patterns. It's very mathematical. But scientists invent some of the coolest creative things. And scientists have to come up with these experiments. And so I feel like they have that creative thing, and it is visual as well. So.
And that takes a lot of imagination. And it also takes a lot of, careful visual analysis of the world around you in order to figure out that there was a problem or a hypothesis, and then, either solve that problem or create some type of conclusion. Because I took my brain way too long to think of the word conclusion tonight. I was like, conclusion. Anyway.
But continue. It is something that if you were more of a left brain person than a right brained, but you still had some right qualities, might be a good career. Accountant, pretty much left brain. I mean, you need a little right brain, but I would say I would agree with that one. Lawyer, I think, is kind of a split, but it's coming up as a left brain career.
Well, I was recently, and by recently I mean in the past couple months, I spoke with two of my friends who are both exceptional lawyers, and they were talking about how there are certain careers in law that they just simply could not do because of the emotions behind it in those areas, and that to be a good lawyer in any field, you almost have to not remove the emotions, but you have to do your job.
So you have to use your left brain and not your right.
So you have to use your left brain to practice law, but the cases that you may take on may be right brain initiated. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Then I had programmer, which I see how it's very left brain, but again, creative. So tricky. Financial analyst. Yeah. Banker. Yeah. Technology support type of people. Those are the careers that came up the most when I was looking at different careers for left brain. Mm-hmm. Then I had for right brain, I had things like therapist, graphic designer, photographer or photo retoucher, creative director, so of maybe a film or stage or something like that, makeup artist, actor, architect, and advertising. But architect requires a lot of mathematical knowledge as well, as does something like, if you're a therapist, you have to be very aware of the medical field.
And advertising, you really have to understand your language.
Yeah. So I feel like for many of these, it's very important to actually be both. Because for something such as a director, you need to be able to express verbally what you need. You need to be organized. You need to know what's going on. So that's left brain, but it's a creative endeavor. Even the most creative of jobs, even if you're just a straight up artist or an actor or something like that, you need that sense of organization and work ethic and focus that your left brain controls. So it's hard to put any career in just one box. And I think both of us, we kind of have careers that meet in the middle.
Right, very much so.
I have a very linguistic focused career, but that also deals a lot with understanding different types of kids and understanding what they might be going through mentally or emotionally or as learners, and creating interesting ways to reach that. So that's a very creative way to use a very left-brained concept.
Right, and I think that one half of my job is very, very planning oriented. It's, you need to book this flight at this time so you can go to this event and meet with this person, and then you have this amount of time to eat your meal, and you're staying here and you're flying out the next day. So like that planning, logical analysis of what to do next is of course there. But then all the things that I'm planning to do all have to do with people. And people, you read people based on visual cues. But at the same time, I also speak to all the people in a different way because of my knowledge of language. Yeah. But I tie the knowledge of language in with my emotional center. And I know that I wouldn't talk to an 18-year-old person studying abroad for the first time the same way as I'd speak to someone who's 26 years old looking to go to graduate school in Ireland and has had several more years of life experiences. So it's very, very different and very combined. And I would totally fail at my job if I didn't have one or the other. So
yeah, I think that a lot of jobs do combine both, and it's hard to just be super dominated by one.
And even, I know that we were talking about lawyers before, but I can't picture someone making a case in court and not appealing to the emotions of the jury.
No, not at all.
In many ways, you have to not turn off your emotions, but put them aside a little bit to get the job done. But it's always something that you're thinking about in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so another question I wanted to talk about. Does society, and specifically education, do we favor the left-brained? Are we not giving the right-brained as fair of a shot in terms of education with the focus on math and language?
Do you want my short answer or my long answer?
Go for it. Whatever you have to say. All of our listeners love to hear Kayla talk.
Short answer is yes, we do.
Uh-huh.
I mean, just look at how the tests that we expect students to take to get into college. You're either taking the SAT or the ACT. And those tests are very heavily weighted on logic and on language. And it was only in recent years that they even added a writing section, which was more about like comprehension and added some of the right brain. But even so, we're not adding in even other parts of what the right brain is so good at, like observation in the sciences or, observation as it applies to art and culture and emotion. So yes, we do left brain over the right brain.
I agree.
Why I don't like standardized tests and why I think that they're not the best way to judge whether a student is intellectual or has intellectual capability or not. And I could talk about this for an entire podcast, but yes.
I do think,
I
agree. I think that the way curriculums are focused, they do put a lot of weight on that. However, I do think that a lot of the actual curriculums are doing a better job in incorporating not the standardized test curriculum, but what teachers are actually trying to do are doing a lot better job in incorporating everything. But, it's sad that the first thing that schools will go to cut is things like art and music, which are very right-brained. But music is actually completely dual-brain. Mm-hmm. It is very mathematical, rhythm, counting, notes, figuring out how to physically play your instrument, or physically, if you're singing, like how to take breaths correctly and use your sound correctly. So that's left. But the creativity and the art and the actual music of it, that's right. So it's art and math at the same time. I would argue that music might be the most important subject, but that's one of the first things schools will go to cut.
I don't want someone who can't count in my choir. No.
And those rhythms, some of those weird time signatures where you gotta divide and subdivide, what is that? That's left brain.
Basic mathematical concepts, then you're not going to be a good musician. You can't. You literally can't.
Yeah. And we all have multiple intelligences, and I think that any successful person uses both their right and left brain. You can't just focus on one. You need both for success in the world, in any field. Even if you're in one of these fields that is super one side or the other.
Right.
Let's try to think of the most left brain career that we can think of and the most right brain career. And then, and I feel like something that's just data analysis is very, very left brain.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a lot easier to think about. I'm like accounting data analysis for
something like that is super left brain. But even so, you would have to, in that super left brain career, interact with people, and you would have to be able to express what's going on. And so you need your emotional right brain in order to communicate effectively and build relationships with people.
Right. And someone like a world-class painter who may
very, very right
earn
brain.
a living creating art would not do as well unless they were able to use that art or like talk about how they created that art so that others could understand why it was important. So,
yeah.
I mean,
linguistic, like, and also organizing it in a way that you can sell the art, the way that people can
right.
see the art. Because if you are just strictly right brain, you might have the best art in the world, and it's going to be in your apartment, and no one's going to see it because you haven't organized getting it out into the world.
And that includes anybody that maybe you have the best art in the world, but you don't have your brain. This is more confidence than brain activity. But I guess that's also part of brain activity. I don't know where self-confidence lies in left or right, but you know, there have been,
I guess.
There have been great writers and artists who never lived to see their stuff get as popular as it is now. Yeah. Like they never thought they had enough talent. So if you don't actively advocate for yourself using language, using logic, then you're not going to succeed in that area either.
So I guess the point is that you need both.
You do need both. We are both.
I
just got a once upon a time flashback. So silly. I think that we need to do something really creative and also logical.
I think we do.
Okay.
So how about we come up with ideas for nurturing both your right and left brain, things that people can do to enhance these parts of their brain. How about that? Does that sound good?
Yes. Okay. Of course, my brain thinks of things that I can do for my left brain. I feel like I really work my left brain a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But things as basic as, for my left brain, I really like to do crossword puzzles.
Yeah.
Like in newspapers and everything, because it gets me to think in a very, very logical way and like just putting all the pieces together and everything. It also has the language in there. But I also like one thing that I do to train to like help my math brain out is that when I can, I try to do simple math in my head. Whether it's like, I try not to use my phone or a calculator because I want to make sure I still have it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I can do it with my times tables or like all that kind of stuff, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I score my tests for kids I don't use calculators. I just, I count up their points and yeah.
Yeah. And every expense report I write, I actually add up the numbers as well as letting it, add itself up in Excel because I trust my brain more than I trust a computer. And then for the right brain, I'm trying to think of how I think this is predominantly right brain, although there is reading in it, but I know that as millennials and iGens, because I'm guessing a lot of our listeners you might be, Gen Xers, and we might have some baby boomers listening, but I'm guessing we have some young Xers. Some young Xers, some mostly millennials, and maybe some iGens. But we're very, very reliant on our computers and our screens. And one thing that I like to do to really like get my brain to like visualize what's going on and where I'm going is I like to read maps, like physical maps of where I'm going. And then my brain can like really look at, okay, so it's not just this GPS telling me to take 95 north. Like this is where you're going. Like this is what that means. And like it gives me an idea of like where I am and where I'm about to go. So that's one. And then I think going out and actually like exploring the world. Like when I'm hiking, I feel like my right brain is so happy. Because like I'm just taking in everything that I'm seeing and it really gets to utilize its spatial awareness side of things, which is nice.
Yeah.
So.
Cool. All right. So I would say things to help build up your right and left brain. left brain obviously seems to be easier to come up with things. I agree with the puzzle thing that you were saying. I also like to maybe do Sudoku.
Yeah.
I like Wordscapes, which is an app that it's kind of like a crossword puzzle, but you swipe words and you have to put letters together, unscramble letters, and move the letters all around. So that's a very good linguistic one. So yeah, those are some left brain ones, as well as maybe just like organization activities. And for your right brain, one of the big ones I would say is your interpersonal relationships, communicating with people. Even though that is a linguistic thing, which is left brain, trying to put yourself in other people's shoes. The empathetic stuff, if you work on your empathetic side, that uses your right brain a lot. That's your emotion and feeling and connecting piece of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So building your relationships is huge. Also, for the creative, artistic side, find a creative outlet. I'm very big on like creative outlets are great for everybody, even if you don't think you're an artist. Even if it's just let me write down some cool ideas, finding some kind of creative outlet is great, whether it is music, whether it is art, whether you want to draw out what you're feeling or write it out. Even though I understand how writing and language is left, but if you use it in a creative way, you are engaging both pieces of your brain. And I think maybe we both exist in the middle because that's something that we have in common, that we both enjoy a lot. The literature, the writing, which is using the language in a creative way.
Actually, one really cool thing for people that maybe they feel like they're not a creative outlet type of person, but they like language would be, and actually I just thought of this and I kind of want to do it myself, is to start a journal, but maybe you don't have to journal like, you don't have to do a whole entry, but just every day write a sentence about your day. Just a sentence. So then you come back to like a year later and you can have a sentence a day of everything that you did. And it can be as simple as like, the best coffee I've tasted is in Antigua, Guatemala. Like that could be your whole sentence. Or,
ooh, I like that idea.
Yeah.
Can we start this?
Yeah, I feel like I need to start that now.
I'm gonna play. I'm gonna do it too.
And then it's almost like you have this entry of just like your random thoughts. And that's a thing. And you can go back and read that. And it's almost like you've created a year-long poem. Like, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like before you go to bed, think about your day.
And then just write down one sentence. It can be like, say.
And obviously it's not going to be about your whole day. It's about whatever piece sticks out.
Whatever piece sticks out of your day.
Yeah. So it could be about something that happened at work. It could be about a person in your life, something they said. It could be about an event you went to. It could be anything.
Mm-hmm. And then you're using your emotions because sometimes your sentences might not be all that great. Maybe when I say not that great, they'll be formed correctly, hopefully, listeners, but
yes,
but
please.
Maybe, yeah, but maybe it'll be something like, today I feel like a failure. And cause some days we feel like that, but then
we all have those days. I've had those days.
And like putting it on paper, it's like you're owning it. So you're like, you know what? That's how I feel today. And you know that that's not true. Everybody has days where they feel like they fail, but that doesn't mean you're a failure. But then like the next day you might be like, peanut butter and carrots is the greatest snack in the universe. Just like silly things like that. Or one day you might say like, today my sentence might be, I never thought I could have such an adrenaline rush being a spectator of a sport rather than playing it. So like, the fact that like you can get like so into a crowd at a game can give you the same adrenaline rush as winning a game that you're playing. But I don't always take the time to appreciate that because I'm so competitive. So the fact that I can be a part of something without actually doing it, that's pretty cool too.
Yeah.
I think I'm actually gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. Okay.
We'll do it and then we'll talk about it next time.
Okay.
Yay!
Cool.
So I think, do you have any other thoughts on right brain, left brain, how it functions scientifically, how it functions in our lives?
I do not at the moment, but I, as always, would like to encourage any listeners who have thoughts on this, please let us know what your thoughts are. There are so many different mediums that you can use to tell us what you're thinking and
You can.
all of that jazz. Don't know why I threw that little phrase in there, but there we go.
And all that jazz.
Exactly. And if you have anything
Sometimes you gotta
want
sing.
to have us speak about, then please give us that as well.
Yeah, suggest some topics to us.
Suggest us.
I'm going to say that again.
But yes.
Suggest topics. We love to hear your topics. You know,
Yes.
we want to talk about things that are interesting to you. So we have lots of ideas. There's lots of crazy stuff going on in both of our brain hemispheres.
Mm-hmm.
But we would love to hear your thoughts and what you want to hear us talk about. Because it's all about you guys.
It is.
We gotta stop doing these at midnight while we're having wine because I'm loopy.
Although listeners, like, this is all my fault. A lot of our, like, late night conversations are because I'm like, I'm sorry, Chelsea, I'm on the road and we need to do this when I get, out of the airport. Or I just went to a Red Sox game and I can't get on the call till 10.
It's all good.
Anyways, until next time, we will have an awesome topic for all of you then, and I will tell you the announcement of whether my brain is more left or more right or smack dab in the middle as I think it may be.
You're probably pretty close to the middle like I am.
Mm-hmm.
You may be like 1 or 2 points off in a direction, but
Right.
All right. Well, use all of your brains this week.
Yes, all of it. It's very important to use both.
Yes, and as you enter into the fall, and if you're starting school again, your new school year, or even if you're not starting school, think like someone who's starting school and use your brain in all the new fun ways.
Mm-hmm.
And get yourself organized and work hard. And fall seems, I know it's not the like new beginning part of the year. The new beginning part of the year is technically spring, but it feels like a new beginning thing to me all the time.
I love fall.
I do too. Well, today was very summery feeling, but fall kind of gives you this like, and now things are starting again kind of feeling to me.
It does. You're right.
So, welcome to September. Welcome to the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to bring you lots of awesome conversations to get you through the fall.
Excellent. All right.
Until
next time, everybody.
See you next time.
Thanks for listening with both sides of the brain this week on the CPO Files. Remember, we love to hear from you, and we would love to hear your topic suggestions. To suggest a topic or leave us a comment, email us at cpofilespodcast@gmail.com. Leave a comment on our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube, or anywhere you listen to this podcast. Have an amazing week, and always stay curious.